work security and so on. This is important too. Thank you.
Dr. Cheng Chung Tai. Good morning. When we talk about reindustrialization in Hong Kong, it's about transition for our industries and revitalization of the industries. Traditionally, our industrialists are pragmatic and they are also flexible. This is it was rather different from our education system today. Our education system aims to train salespersons, and the key is on efficiency. And there's a lack of system or problem-solving capabilities. Such comments might not shine a positive light on our generation, but I'm not talking about today. The focus is not on our education system. What I want to say is that we have an opportunity for a renaissance of our industries. So if we are to achieve reindustrialization, property prices must first come down. You might think I'm trying to talk about expensive rents or high land prices, but it's not as simple as that. First of all, we must understand the situation with our industries today. Many people would feel that Hong Kong no longer has industries, but there are industries we must focus on. One, food manufacturing. Foodstuff has been one of our pillar industries because Hong Kong is reliable. Under our judicial system, if there are problems with foodstuff, we would be protected. And there is reassurance, and we have seen a lot of outstanding brands in foodstuff. As for associated industries such as tobacco or local wine brewing, so these are industries we have. And we have been producing small components such as some buttons, zippers, or ornaments to clothes, etc. In the 1980s to 90s, a lot of our industries have moved northwards, but some industries still remain, and they are our competitive edge. So when we talk about reindustrialization, unlike what some members and the Secretary said, they said we should innovate, we should come up with high value-added industries. This is not the case. Our biggest advantages stem from our judicial system and reliability. But looking at the government's policy in the last 10 years or so, these industries face a very different external environment. 6 or 7 years ago, there was a revitalization policy on industries. These industries relied on cheap plants or sites they own themselves, but due to the high land price policy, Carrie Lam came up with the revitalization policy on industrial estates, and the balance was destroyed. So when these plants were driven out, what were the consequences? It's not just about a manufacturing place, but the hub of manufacturing was destroyed. In other words, the places we went to buy those small components, for example, we could buy them in Sham Shui Po, but there are also plants. But with the disappearance of such areas, merchants and manufacturers faced even higher costs. So at the end of the day, when we talk about reindustrialization, the government should reflect upon what they have done and even apologize. You are the main culprit in the decline of our industries. In 2008, and Wang Yang from the Guangdong Municipal Government came up with a new policy, and as such, manufacturers went to areas which are cheaper, for example, the northwest of China, and these people were the ones who gave up on Hong Kong 30 years ago, and now we are encouraging them to come back. Of course, we would not say no to them, but under the current mode, we can never reinvigorate our industries. We must be pragmatic, and we must face up to history. After World War II, when we look at the history of Japan or the 1997 financial crisis, Japanese and Korean history told us that re-industrialization certainly has elements of protectionism, and if we are to protect the locals, we must protect our own brands. Right now, we are looking at mainland products which are pretending to be Japanese products, and they are trying to appear Japanese. So we have always relied on reliability in terms of manufacturing. So a decline in the property market would be key. So the government should also reflect upon themselves, and when our manufacturers come back, we should think about protecting our own. Mr. Michael Lo. President, today we are discussing the reindustrialization policy, and by saying reindustrialization, it means we used to have industries, but they have experienced a decline, and hopefully they can improve in the future. In the 1970s to 80s, manufacturing was prosperous. We had plastics, garments, toys. They benefited the economy and brought many jobs. But by the 80s and 90s, Hong Kong's economy underwent a facelift. The productions moved northwards, and manufacturing used to make up 30% of our GDP, and now it's only 1.2%. The employment size also fell below 100,000. We only have about 3,000 electronics practitioners. For textiles and clothing, only 3,000 or 4,000. And for food stuff, we have more than 20,000. But we would not exactly call these high technology and high value added industries. The industries are too narrow, and they rely too much on financial services and real estate. So in the past 10 years or so, the real growth of salary has been negligible. The decline in our industries, if we are to launch reindustrialization, a lot of work has to be done. A lot of primary production chains have disappeared. Shenzhen can take care of design, molding, manufacturing. They can do everything in one go. However, Hong Kong cannot rebuild its industry chains. So we must come up with the right policies and specifically promote different industries. So first of all, we must have policies. Tax measures are very important, and they can achieve immediate effect. We have been embracing a simple and low tax regime. But how can we appeal to industries via our tax regime? We must provide tax concessions or tax deductions. The trades and FTU ask whether tax deductions can be granted for I&T operations. The R&D expenditure was only 0.74% of our GDP. So if we are to promote R&D investment, we cannot just rely on the government. Private sector participation is also crucial. We are glad that in the policy address, the government addressed the issue for the first 2 million of eligible R&D expenditure. There could be a 300% tax deduction, while the remaining portion can enjoy a 200% deduction. We hope the measures can be put in place ASAP, and the extent of the discussion of the deductions can be enhanced, and the application criteria should not be too complicated. Like many other social issues, land remains a priority. Reindustrialization requires a supply of land. And we have the Innovation Technology Park at the Lok Ma Chau Loop area. We have the Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks Corporation and the industrial estates. And all these would be used for I&T. The FTE also cares about the use of existing industrial estates. The FTU's I&T policy is not limited to cutting-edge technology. We feel that reindustrialization should also include production of jewelry, watches and clocks, textiles, etc., which carry a more personal touch. And we have our advantage in these industries. Unfortunately, many of these industries could not exist in industrial estates because, according to the land leases of IEs, only industrial operations are allowed, and the definition of such is very narrow. And you must engage in manufacturing processes. For instance, if you are to, the industries I mentioned involved tailor-making products with customers, so why can't they be carried out in IEs? So the definition currently used is very narrow. So the government should review the definition of industrial use, which was set up more than 10 years ago. It's product design and industry as well, and for R&D programmers, multimedia designers, for certain manufacturing processes. Can they be considered part of the automation process? Can they be carried out in our industrial estates? And Hong Kong has traditionally favored commerce and industry, and vocational education only makes up 26% of our higher education, which is exactly opposite of Switzerland and Singapore. It shows that those countries place an emphasis on their talents, and for these vocational training places, students can pick up the industrial know-how according to a ranking, an international ranking, and Hong Kong UST ranks 30, and HKU also ranks among the top. It shows it's testament to our R&D capabilities. And a lot of our industries have declined, however, and we have lost a lot of talents. And compared with mainland and our neighbors, we are falling far behind. One clear example is the DJI founder. He could not take root in Hong Kong. And for the example of my car mentioned by another member, we sold the patent to another country.
Mr. Holden Chow. President, today's topic is reindustrialization. So for the successful industrial countries, Germany may come to mind. So allow me to use my time to describe their situation, so that when we are plan our reindustrialization, maybe it can provide some guidance for us. So the industrial achievement of Germany is very much attributed to their traditional culture. So when we talk about a success of the German industries, successful products, the best examples would be German cars, like Siemens, and electric appliances. These are just major brands. If you explore in depth, in the case of Germany, the true bedrock of industry are not the biggest brands, but rather the small and medium enterprises. These SMEs, their products are sold around the world and famous for reputation. These SMEs may not as household names that are instantly recognizable. However, each one of them are managed to manufacture good quality products. According to Harvard Business Review, have an in-depth analysis on the SMEs. Allow me to quote from them. According to HBR, these SMEs, when hiring local Germans in the private employment market, they employed about 70% of the workforce. So as you can see, these SMEs serve as the pillar of the economy. So referring to the big companies, let's say enter the Fortune 500 ranking, Germany have 28 companies in the list. And this is not really a true indicator. Like see, for the successful SMEs, according to the HBR, there's about 1,300 SMEs that are quite successful and has been crowned as hidden champions, because since they are hardly famous and yet managed to churn out very quality products and able to sustain the German economy very effectively. The listeners may ask, what is the successful factors to make these SMEs to succeed? First, on the they place a lot of value on long-term talent development. They are less focused on short-term results. Well, plainly speaking, for a German SME employer, if for them to choose to sell a company to make a profit to invest on bigger companies, or they actually would rather choose to stay in the company and they're not interested in short-term profits. On the other hand, they would value the long-term profit growth, especially whether the product can achieve an excellence to build its reputation in the sector. So I think these are cultural differences which explain why these SMEs are mostly family-run and passed on from generations to another. They are not listed in the stock market as well. So why they're not unlisted? The HBR also analyzed that if they think that if they listed these companies, their control may be affected by the market or shareholder interference, that we're not able to live out the mission of the enterprise. In order to demonstrate the founders of the operators' philosophy, they'd rather keep the companies private. And their staff turnover is quite low as well. And then reports have shown that the German SME employee turnover is less than 10% a year, 2% a year rather. So this begs the question, how could it achieve such a low turnover? Besides developing sense of belonging for the employees, they will stick with the company good times and bad. So in the U.S., in times of economic recession or when a decrease in corporate profit, there will be write-offs right away. And for the German SMEs, they would rather share the burden with the employees. Instead of layoffs, they would just adjust to working hours or to take a pay cut, so just to tide over this difficult period. Instead of being affected by short-term economic fluctuations in making moves that would affect the employees, that will be beneficial to the development of the company. I said so much that to tell the government that besides providing land and policy support, I think the government should play the role of the educator to the business operators to foster the culture that through the policy support or through a cultivating a kind of culture to establish such kind of culture. If we have to take a long-term planning for industrialization in Hong Kong, I think we will succeed.
多謝主席。
Thank you, President.
支持今日構建全方位再工業。
Support the industrialization motion by Jimmy NG. And in the past, Hong Kong showed over-concentration of industry that obstructed diversification of economy to benefit all social strata. Therefore, I welcome the government and say it out loud that the industrialization has the potential to become a main driver of our economy. However, to drive and to implement re-industrialization, simply relying on establishing the Committee on Innovation, Technology and Reindustrialization is probably nowhere enough. Like Mr. Jimmy NG said, to effectively drive reindustrialization, we need different departments and inter-department collaboration and participation. President, reindustrialization, of course, required the INT to complement in adding value. However, I don't want to see reindustrialization mainly focused to drive INT industries. Then we need to have a smart and green industries should exist as well. To effectively promote reindustrialization, the government that in its policy formulation and legal would need to dovetail. There will be sufficient talent, land, and housing supply that should not be missing. In taking into account these factors, like my colleagues have mentioned, that we need to redefine the term industry. We can't deny that a lot of the legislations in Hong Kong had an outdated definition of industry. We must redefine industry. Like arts and culture and creative industry, data analysis and application, should they be included as or counted to as industry? The land application have been restricted by various pieces of law. For example, the building ordinance, the town planning ordinance, and the deed and the land deeds. So I have to talk about the impact of the land deeds. I believe that the land lease will grant it for quite a number of years. However, in Germany, it used, for example, industry. Very often, the designation is based on the past uses.
前瞻性嘅。
There is nothing forward-looking in it. So whenever there are new industries emerging, does it comply with existing land use? Sometimes this becomes an obstacle to the development of emerging industries. If you don't comply with land lease conditions, then you will have to apply to modify the land lease so that land use intended can be permitted. It will take time, and very often you will have to pay premium. These are obstacles, and these obstacles will impede the development of innovation and new industries. So when it comes to land lease restrictions, can there be more flexibilities? Can the administration take into account the speed and need for reindustrialization? I recall back in the 1990s, Hong Kong was developing into a data center. The administration spent at least 2 years before it could confirm whether data center servers can be housed in commercial buildings or industrial buildings. A lot of time was spent on it. How can we enhance our efficiency of reindustrialization? The administration needs to put more thoughts into it. Back in 1997, there was a study done on industrial land use, and in 1999, the review on the industrial land use strategy was completed, and at that time, land use of commercial use was put in place. It's high time that another review be conducted. Well, of course, apart from land lease, there are needs to have supporting or facilitating legislation. You see that we are in great need of a review. In order to effectively promote reindustrialization, I urge the administration to review the definition of industry and to put in place facilitating land use policies. We do need more supporting measures to make sure that reindustrialization will take place. Mr. Alvin Yeung. Finally, my speaking notes can see the light of day after sitting in my drawer for a very long time. I would like to explain about my point. We're not here to talk about whether we should reindustrialize again or not, but we need to talk about what it is. It will benefit Hong Kong, so we should go ahead. But how? The productivity or the ITB talked about reindustrialization or Industry 4.0. What is it all about? What are the merits and demerits? We have to know more before we can decide. We have to ensure that in the process of reindustrialization, Hong Kong people will indeed benefit, especially when it comes to employment and the quality of employment. We also need to think about the outcome of reindustrialization. Taking stock of what happened in the Tung Chee Hwa era, say Cyberport They sounded grand, but they changed. The nature changed. We have Hong Kong 2030 plus. The administration said that 250,000 or 300,000 people can be accommodated in the new territories, offering an employment of 210,000 jobs. And there is altogether with Hong Shui Kiu or the River Loop, there will be about 400,000 jobs. But what are these jobs? Do they meet the needs of the 21st century? We also have to talk about Hong Kong's manufacturing industry and creative industry. When it comes to startups, apart from research development, the hardware is equally important. We often need to seek assistance from the mainland because of cheap costs. However, R&D done in Hong Kong for the product to be manufactured on the mainland, from our experience, we learned that the major benefactor of such an approach is the mainland. We have to consider whether this approach is still suitable for this day and age. On the mainland, there is a very weak awareness of protection of intellectual property. We see a number of companies losing lawsuits to the mainland when it comes to infringement. In Hong Kong, we have an abundance of creativity, but can the mainland provide us with the support we need? I need to hear more from the administration. Leaving aside the inadequacies of the mainland, we need to think about what we do need for re-industrialization. We need manpower. That's the most important thing. And Professor said that, university education is very important. We're not just talking about the death of researchers, but the breadth as well. Well, in the past, universities train up civil servants, and then they trained R&D personnel. But it seems that they are stuck. There is nothing more beneficial that they can give us. Is it the case that we will endlessly ask mainland people to come to work in Hong Kong? I'm afraid that Mr. Yeung, the Secretary, is not in a position to answer on behalf of the Secretary for Education. Anyway, I want to reflect my concern to the administration. I remember a lot of grand slogans of reindustrialization, but we do need people to make it happen. If we don't train local talents, if we only want to import talent from the mainland, then there is no basis for such development to be sustainable. How do we train local talents? How do we train manpower that will meet the needs of our future needs? And there is another thing. We need land, which itself is a restriction on the development. The Secretary talked about the River Loop area, saying that it's a very important infrastructure area. But what about Science Park in Ma Liu Shui? When we have Science Park in Ma Liu Shui, however, in 2014, 8 hectares of land in Whitehead has been turned into an industrial use. It seems that it runs counter to what they say about the importance of the River Loop area. If we do need River Loop area, how come that the White Pillar land in Pak Shek Kok is changed to become residential use? I don't mean to negate reindustrialization. However, we need to first consider manpower, land policy. You can't just talk about technology in vacuum. You need supporting policies. So in the end, I hope that these slogans will not be empty ones. I'm looking forward to complete answers from the Secretary. We support Mr. Jimmy Ng's motion. The Civic Party will support Kenneth LEUNG, WU Chi-wai, Charles MOK, and other members, Jeremy TAM's amendment.
Mr. Kok Wai Kai, thank you, Madam Deputy. Let me say up front that we should clearly define what we mean by reindustrialization. What matters most is that we want to know about the spirit and the message behind reindustrialization. What does it mean? According to the government, promoting reindustrialization means introducing high value-added manufacturing industries into Hong Kong, so the high value-added procedures can take place in Hong Kong, and that promotion and development in that front is can happen to promote the economy and create quality jobs. FTU is all for it. But what about introducing high and advanced manufacturing industry, high value-added advanced manufacturing industries? We have reservations on that. If the government can implement a series of measures to attract Hong Kong investors to move back their manufacturing processes from the mainland to Hong Kong, this is something good. But why do we have reservations? Because we have to ask, reindustrialization, is it limited just to high value-added advanced manufacturing? Can we not seize hold of this opportunity to support traditional manufacturing industries and help them transform themselves? Many fellow members have quoted Germany as an example. Germany is not undertaking reindustrialization. It's been doing industrialization all the time. It's doing enhancement all the time. We talk about Industry 4.0. That is to say that we try to, in relation to traditional industries like automobile, electronic, try to instill advanced technology so that these industries can embark on smart production and enhance the production process, and then raise the technology content of the industry so that as a result the manufacturing chain can be upgraded. The industrialization process is very much an evolving process, and continuous intervention is needed. Now, let me put it more frankly. If we have to succeed in reindustrialization, we must first have industries. We must have the traditional industries serving as the basis, or else reindustrialization will just become as an empty slogan. Hong Kong cannot be compared directly to overseas jurisdictions because Hong Kong, we have a 3.9 million workers. Around 3.2%, around 120,000 people are involved in manufacturing industries. That takes up only 1% of the GDP in Hong Kong. That means Hong Kong's manufacturing industry is very small in scale and is, to my mind, is almost close to extinction. So if the government really wants to do reindustrialization, they should not just focus on INT industry, value-added industries. The government should adopt a multi-pronged approach to support traditional industries and industries with advantages like logistics, so that there is a solid basis for reindustrialization. For traditional manufacturing industries in Hong Kong, they have once been very well known around the world. They are, for example, textiles, garment, clocks and watches, jewelry, high-end fashion. They've enjoyed good reputation around the world, even up to today. So if the government can launch a series of measures to support these industries with advantages, that can be part or a starting point for reindustrialization. I must also mention something about shipbuilding. I grew up in Hong Kong myself. In Ap Lei Chau recently, we found that the shipbuilding industry faces a great problem. There are so many fishing vessels going back to the mainland for repair. For Hong Kong shipyards, they are just repairing, say, the some vessels and pleasure boats and so on. Some ship yards and their tenants, and actually they are a brand from the overseas. So this Hong Kong repair shop is the first franchised yard in Hong Kong and overseas. But then the Lands Department is granting them an STT guarantee for 5 years or 7 years. Now, the tenant for that STT spent 2 years to build up the electricity and water supply, and then they have only around 2 years in tenancy, and they can't make enough profits from that period. And for other people, they told me that the ship building industry is facing a lot of difficulties. 7 years is too short for them, and if they can't win the bid again, they have to dismiss their workers who are skilled in their respective trade. But the Lands Department is out of touch with reality in drawing up such policies, and the shipbuilding industry is hit once again. They are not assisted at all. And in November last year, I've tried to meet with the Marine Department and the THB and the Lands Department to try to discuss these tenancy issues. Up to now, I haven't been able to meet with them. So obviously, the authorities don't regard shipbuilding as part of the manufacturing industry in Hong Kong. I wonder whether the CEDB will care about them the tenancy of the 5-year tenancy period will expire towards the end of this year. So are we allowing the shipbuilding industry to diminish or not? Now, environmental protection industry, there is internal demand for that sector. But then the Hong Kong government, apart from granting loans, what other measures are there in place to help them to revitalize Hong Kong's manufacturing industry? We should not just replicate experience from overseas. Well, just like learning Tai Chi, we should learn the complete package. So the government should not be lazy in its efforts. I don't want reindustrialization be just an empty slogan. There should be specific measures to help industries with the potential, including traditional industries, can be helped so that Hong Kong's industrial development can be further promoted. Thank you. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Thank you, Madam Chair. The reindustrialization should have been discussed a year ago for any measures and policies which can promote Hong Kong's economic development. The earlier it is discussed, the better. The more it is discussed, the better. I come from the industrial sector, so I would fully support reindustrialization. If Hong Kong is to do that, it is easier said than done. The government must give enough support to the industry and catch up fast enough. Industries used to be a major driving force of economic development in Hong Kong. Wealth was accumulated, and we've contributed to the mainland's economic development and opening up. But times have changed. Many industries have moved northwards, and traditional industries are in Hong Kong are declining or dwindling. As the internet gets popular, traditional industries are facing challenges. In 2013, the Germany proposed Industry 4.0. The aim is to turn mass production to customization in production. In 2015, the country mentioned Industry 2.25, and that is to turn labor-intensive industry into some new models. Under this, against this background, a lot of innovation technology parks and industrial parks have been established in mainland cities. The government has been given support in terms of financial subsidy and land grant, and many parks come with very good plans and are sizable in scale. In April, last year, the government established a committee on innovation technology and reindustrialization to coordinate work on that front. On the government's part, we are still at a brainstorming stage or planning stage. We don't have any specific plans and measures yet, and this is the problem that we are facing. It is difficult for us to make a head start. The government should come up with more policy support. It could do a better job. First, I would like to I welcome the current term government in the policy address stating that there will be tax deduction for R&D. Enterprises are encouraged to invest more in R&D as Hong Kong's economic structure is transforming, the manufacturing industry is taking a smaller ratio of the GDP, and the industries are not very keen on doing R&D. Many years ago, the government has launched the ITF and a series of measures to help SMEs in brand promotion and providing subsidy to them. But then the utilization rate is not very high and the support is inadequate, and the application procedures are cumbersome. So the enterprises are not very keen to apply for these funds to upgrade and transform themselves. Now, but then there have been suggestions in the community that taxpayers' money should not be used to subsidize the businessmen. I think these people are nitpicking by saying that. The businessmen are also taxpayers themselves. The government should create the best business environment for them, provide them with the best support so that they can earn a profit and pay tax and promote economic development. If they are left to fend for themselves, who will ultimately suffer? On the other hand, if we are to attract high value-added advanced manufacturing industries back to Hong Kong, where do we get the land? According to the planning department's study on commercial space and office space, whether it is traditional industries, data centers, modern logistics and certification and testing sectors, the land for these industries will be in short supply in the short, medium, and long term. And when does the money and land for re-industrialization come from? How can we achieve a synergy effect? Shouldn't the government develop more land resources to meet with the overall needs of the society? Also, we are running short of talents as well, and also the commercialization of R&D results. According to the HKPC's report, in many sectors, there is a problem of succession. There are no, the old masters are about to retire, and there isn't enough new blood. The VTC has already launched apprenticeship programs, but that apprentices take time to become masters. And in universities in Hong Kong, those who are involved in R&D, I think the number should also go up. How can we attract these R&D people to Hong Kong, apart from creating the right, providing with the right material support? We need the ambience as well. Even if we have the talents and we have the techniques, how can we commercialize the R&D results? The ITB has reserved $5 million to launch this talent support program, and we will train up local talents on Industry 4.0. I hope that the ITB can announce these measures as soon as possible. Now, technology develops in leaps and bounds, and there are new technologies coming up every day, and new problems will arise. The government should not be sticking to its old thinking, and should try to think out of the box, should not be constrained by past restrictions. Try to create the best conditions for application of new technologies. This is a knowledge-based society, knowledge-based age. Apart from government support, the different sectors in the community should pull together our efforts, and we to cut down on disputes and create a favorable environment for Hong Kong to gather all talents and seize hold of our opportunities and enhance our competitive edge. Thank you. So I speak.
Dr. Kwok Kai-ki, Madam Deputy, I first have to thank Mr. Jimmy NG for sponsoring this motion. Given this very distorted society in Hong Kong, I think you are regarded as a rare animal if you engage in research for large consortia. And ordinary members of the public, they all go for making a fast buck, because I think this is the making of the government's policies. intentionally or otherwise, the government has introduced a highland premium policy. So people will respect the 4 largest property developers in Hong Kong, from the Kwok, the Lees, family, so on and so forth. Very few people would respect manufacturers. Well, when we were secondary school kids in the 1970s, our industry was at its prime age, and we used to go to factories for summer jobs in Kwun Tong, in Kwai Chung, and we could see the entrepreneur spirit of Hong Kong people there. However, with opening up of the mainland, in the initial phase, the mainland used to be a paradise for Hong Kong manufacturers. Wages were low, and then there was a little legislation on environmental protection. So most manufacturing lines were relocated to the Pearl River Delta, with the support offices still in Hong Kong. However, times have changed. Manufacturers are no longer eager to relocate to the mainland because wages have increased and there are more environmental requirements, and there is also bribery and corruption. So many manufacturers have shifted to places in Southeast Asia, such as Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Cambodia, the less developed economies. But in the long term, should we continue to give up our manufacturing industries? Starting from the year 2000, the GDP accountable by the manufacturing sector was 4.8% in the year 2000, but now it's 3.5%. I think some members have suggested that new technologies and automation can be used in Hong Kong to promote production. Mr. Jimmy Ng should understand that the government is doing a lot of things that is going against re-industrialization. Take land as an example. People would like to use industrial sites to take advantage of the low rent and also a lower cost for manufacturing. But the administration has marginalized industrial sites in Kowloon East and Kwun Tong. They are now grade A offices. If you want to have factories, well, you cannot survive there. Are there new sites granted? Maybe not, but the industrial sites are not really meant for SMEs. The latest industrial estate will be built as multi-story buildings like the flatted factories we used to have. But it would mean at least 2 to 3 decades lost because of the gap. But of course, late is better than never. I can only see the Secretary for Information and Technology here. If the government really attaches significance to this topic, then the Financial Secretary and the Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development and other officials should be here to tune into this debate, because this debate is not about one single issue. Now, if the Secretary for INT has to be solely responsible for re-industrialization, this is a bit far-fetched, because the Bureau is tasked to carry out innovation and promote technology. But not all industries is about INT. For instance, we have this Hong Kong brand of water flask, well received by young people. They receive a few hundreds of orders per day, and young people like that because they trust the Hong Kong brand name. When we went to a Hong Kong trade fair, there were lots of Hong Kong brands, but now this is no longer the case. And I think we have forgone a lot of development opportunities and jobs. this is a sector that can attract many young people. For larger economies in Scandinavian countries and West Europe, they have never given up on industrialization. Although they have a higher level of technology than Hong Kong, but they have never given up their industries. They still have that competitive edge. If they have a new technology, they can at once produce a product of technology nearby. But in Hong Kong, the production is inevitably done in the mainland, so we cannot reap full benefits. Young people have no way out, because if they don't like to engage in property speculation or stocks speculation, they may not necessarily like a services sector. So some of them can be very happy working in the manufacturing sector. Many of them gained satisfaction and made a fortune out of our industries. But now I do not see any planning from the administration in a wider perspective. I really want more secretaries to be present, but if we only have the S and IT, I don't think we can really achieve anything. Still, I support the motion. Does any member wish to speak? Mr. Jimmy Ng, you may now speak on the amendments. The time limit is 5 minutes. Mr. Jimmy Ng. Thank you, Madam Deputy. First, I have to thank the 7 colleagues who have moved amendments to my motion, and 60 members who have spoken on them. They have given us very valuable suggestions out of their professional expertise, and the 7 members who have amended my motion have come from BBA, the Civic Party, the DAB, and the Democratic Party, so on and so forth. So there is a cross-party support for my motion, and the government cannot afford to drag its feet further. Now, I'd like to comment on the amendments one by one. Mr. HO Kai-ming's amendment is about creating jobs, and it's also about reviving the Hong Kong, made in Hong Kong brand name. I cannot support more. As regards Mr. LO Wai-kwok and Dr CHIANG Lai-wan's amendments that talk about leverage on the Belt and Road Initiative and the Belt Development, I cannot agree more, so I will vote for these 3 amendments. Mr. Charles Mok's amendment is relatively simple. It's about stressing the importance of information technologies and to enhance training of technology talents required by re-industrialization. Although his amendment has deviated a little bit from a regional motion, as a matter of principle, I still find it supportable. Regarding Mr. WU Chi-wai's amendment, is about promoting and upgrading traditional industries, developing new industry chains, and encouraging talent development. I welcome that. Basically, I understand Mr. Jeremy Ho's amendment, that is to offer policy support to arts, cultural, and creative industries. And he said that small-scale or industries can also give rise to creative products. But of course, musical and artistic performance may not be directly related to traditional industries. But still, if there are creative industries that can yield products, if we can make a distinction between this and also creative industries that do not produce any products, well, still his amendment is supportable. Mr. Kenneth LEUNG's amendment scrapped the part about providing taxation support to Hong Kong manufacturers operating in the mainland. In fact, this has been the aspirations of the sector for all along. So to take care of the livelihood of the related manufacturers, I cannot support Mr. Kenneth LEUNG's motion. Thank you.
Secretary for Innovation and Technology. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I would like to thank the valuable opinions given by a number of members who spoke on the establishing a comprehensive reindustrialization policy. Your speeches show that you attach a lot of importance to reindustrialization policy. And what is more encouraging is that members from different political affiliations share the same views on the policy directions of reindustrializations, which can definitely help in our concerted efforts to promote development of new industrial sectors. Summing up the original motion and the amendments made by the 7 members and those who have just spoken, you have certain expectations on the government's work in promoting reindustrialization. First, it should have positive impact on Hong Kong's economic development and employment. Second, it should enhance the technical standards of the relevant sectors and promote closer integration among hardware, software, and services. Third, is to train up talents with cross-sector multiple technical skills who will be able to work in high value-added work and procedures. Fourth, it has to assist existing sectors to leverage on innovation and technology to upgrade and transform so that they can ride on the latest trends on the development of the internet and shared economy. And lastly, the relevant policies must be comprehensive and sustainable and can dovetail with the country's strategic plans. In fact, these aspirations are in line with the government's thinking. I believe that in order to successfully turn deindustrialization to reindustrialization in Hong Kong, we must create the following conditions. First, we must provide the appropriate infrastructure facilities to promote industrial R&D and enhance the capability of advanced manufacturing. Second, we must create an environment conducive to R&D and development. Say, for example, offering full protection to intellectual property, encouraging enterprises to invest in R&D to create new business and production models, and also promote the sharing of knowledge among shareholders. Third, we must provide the appropriate tax incentives and financial support to drive industrial R&D. Fourth, we must train up the talents to boost the labor force's productivity and workers' ability to adjust themselves. During the course of reindustrialization in Hong Kong, we hope to focus on sectors with advantages or in need, including sectors for building a healthy old population, robotics, smart city, and fintech. In the past 2 years, we have launched a number of measures in the above sector and have invested substantially in these sectors. In terms of infrastructure facilities, in 2016, we applied for funding to carry out the first phase expansion of the Science Park. Upon its completion in 2020, the gross floor area of the Science Park will increase to 400,000 square meters. In addition, there will be the establishment of a data tech hub and the advanced manufacturing center in the Chung Kwan O Industrial Estate to promote smart production. The data tech hub is expected to be commissioned in 2020. Then, the specially designed infrastructure and support facilities for data tech and telecommunication services will be provided. And for the advanced manufacturing center will be completed in 2022. It will focus on promoting developing intelligent production and advanced assembly of devices and installations for medical and biomedical technology, robotics, and smart city. The total cost for these development projects will amount to $12.7 billion. Dr. Zhang also mentioned something about medical technology being a sector with advantages and competitiveness in Hong Kong. We will consider identify appropriate premises in the Taipo and Yuen Long Industrial Estate for refurbishment for development of medical technology. And Hong Kong Shenzhen INT Park will be established in the Loop area, and a key collaboration base for R&D will be established. In the budget just delivered, we have proposed that $20 billion be set aside to support the first phase development of the INT Park. This amount to be used for land formation, infrastructure facilities, superstructure construction, and initial operation for phase 1 of the INT Park. This shows the government's determination and commitment to develop INT. In addition, we have submitted to the LegCo a funding application on the land decontamination advance works and design and site investigations for phase 1 works at the INT Park. To further promote the development of industrial estates, we have also initially picked a site near Lintang, Hung Yuen Wai BCP to develop a new IE. We are now conducting an initial planning study to explore the possibility of developing that plot, which can serve as a basis for considering the development scale and the detailed planning and engineering design study. These initiatives will provide more opportunities for INT development and reindustrialization in Hong Kong. In terms of technology, the 5 local R&D centers will conduct R&D studies on reindustrialization in their respective ambits. Also, the Hong Kong Productivity Council will provide comprehensive consultancy services to the sectors to help the enterprises to move towards high value-added production and Industry 4.0. And that includes the Smart Industry 1 established in last August to demonstrate the operation concepts and smart features of Industry 4.0, and it will help promote information exchanges in the sector on Industry 4.0. These works can facilitate knowledge sharing in the sector and establish closer relationship within the sector. In terms of financial subsidy, the Innovation and Technology Fund under it has many support grants, including INT support program, university industry collaboration program, enterprise support program, patent application grant, etc. We encourage universities and enterprises to do more R&D to promote reindustrialization. Regarding talents, we are working hard to train up cross-sector talents, and we have implemented various measures, for example, InnoTech Scholarship, incubation programs of the Science Park and Cyberport, to help identify young people with potential and exploit their potential to the fullest. The government in the latest budget announced that $200 million will be allocated to Cyberport to strengthen support for startups and to promote the development of the digital tech ecology at Cyberport. And the financial subsidy for startup under the Cyberport incubation program will increase from $330,000 to $500,000 to help universities develop tech startups. We have launched in 2014 the Technology Startup Support Scheme for universities to encourage universities to launch startups and to commercialize R&D outputs. I'm happy to tell members that right now 155 university startup enterprises are benefited, and some of them have actually won awards in international and INT competition, and they've received investment from some capital venture funds. But I must point out that commercialization of R&D results cannot be achieved at one stroke. Many young entrepreneurs have failed before they succeed subsequently. In the past few years, we are seeing a greater pool of INT talents in Hong Kong, and the society is attaching more importance to INT culture, and that is conducive to our reindustrialization efforts. And at the same time, we are competing with our neighbors for talents. So the government will commit more resources to attract people to join the INT sector, and we will cultivate a new culture with vibrancy. Also, in order to groom and pool more tech talents, the CE in the policy address delivered last October has announced that under the ITF, $500 million will be set aside for tech talent program, and that includes launching the postdoctorate hub to subsidize enterprises to hire postdoctorate degree holders, and also subsidize reindustrialization and technology train program to subsidize Hong Kong enterprises hires to receive training in the most advanced technology, including the Industry 4.0. We have also enhanced the internship program, and starting October last year, we have raised the monthly subsidy for the interns. And in December, we have extended that program to cover all tenants engaged in the INT in the Science Park and Cyberport. We will further expand the program to cover local tech startup funded by the INT Venture Fund, so that more enterprises and STEM graduates can benefit. Reindustrialization straddles across different policy portfolios and entails joint efforts of all government departments. The Committee on IT and Reindustrialization is headed by the FS, and it is coordinating INT development in Hong Kong at a senior level and across different boroughs. At the same time, to encourage enterprises to conduct more R&D programs, it was announced in the policy address that local R&D undertaken by enterprises can be entitled to extra tax deduction. In the first half of this year, we will be introducing an IR Ordinance Amendment Bill to the LegCo to propose that the first $2 million eligible R&D expenditure of enterprises will enjoy a 300% tax reduction, while the remainder will be entitled to a 200% tax deduction, and there is no ceiling to be imposed. At the same time, because of the integration opportunities to be brought by the Bay Area development, the government is again reviewing the Hong Kong's tax revenue laws in relation to Hong Kong businessmen investing in machinery out of Hong Kong, and whether the tax concessions can be offered. That we are exploring other feasible options without compromising the price transfer principles. Now, in terms of education policies, the UGA has, in response to the government's invitation, has established a dedicated working group to review the research policy and subsidy policy in tertiary education to ensure that the relevant researchers can meet with the society's and economic needs. And the UGC-funded institutions, in response to the government's request, will be strengthening the functions of their knowledge transfer offices and to try to speed up the work to commercialize R&D results to dovetail with the reindustrialization policy. All these measures show that the government is determined to promote reindustrialization in Hong Kong. Mr. Jimmy NG mentioned about the external development feature of Hong Kong's industries in his original motion. This is a major advantage of Hong Kong's reindustrialization. Hong Kong industrialists have abundant capital, experience, and international network. We hope that the enterprises can move their core departments and high-valued procedures back to Hong Kong, or to build new high-value added industries in Hong Kong and to provide high-quality jobs for Hong Kong people. I believe that these enterprises can put their resources in product development and design, brand promotion and management, and for studying into high-value added and high-tech projects. Through transformation and upgrade, we can make the Made in Hong Kong brand shine again in the world market. This kind of external development feature also highlights the present situation where Hong Kong's economy is closely integrated with the mainland. As pointed out by Dr. Zhang and Mr. LO Wai-kwok, when the government promotes re-industrialization policy, we must align ourselves with the country's policy. We must use the resources in the neighboring regions and achieve complementarity. The CPG has said that it will support Hong Kong participating in the Belt and Road Initiative and that Hong Kong should play a major role in the development of the PRD area. And there will be efforts to build a Bay Area and also the establishment of a cross-district cooperation platform. The Loop INT Park, coupled with the sectors with advantages in the Bay Area, will help drive INT development in the region, achieving good synergy. There will be close integration in sectors in the upper, mid, and streams. Hong Kong will continue to strengthen our cooperation exchanges with the mainland counterparts, and we will seize the precious opportunities to be brought to Hong Kong by all these strategic plans. Now, Mr. WU Chi-wai asked about the contribution of INT Park to Hong Kong's INT sectors. The INT, or the Science Park rather, has employees of over 30,000 people, and over 70%, 9,000, are directly involved in R&D work. And the Science Park has groomed over 500 tech startups, including the unicorn. We believe that in the latest budget, the funding to be allocated to the Science Park will help its future development, and it will help increase the R&D output as ratio in Hong Kong's GDP. I would now like to respond to Mr. Jeremy TAM's amendment. Mr. Tam asked that the government provide policy support to support the reindustrialization of arts, culture, and creative industries so that these industries can carry out production and disseminate their artworks in appropriate industrial lands. This proposal has been discussed at other occasions. We support any initiatives by any industry to leverage on INT to promote developments of INT industries, including arts, culture, and creative industries. As for the specific measures and also the policies on industrial land, these will be considered and handled by the relevant policy bureaus. Now, under the policy framework of reindustrialization, the government will focus our efforts in promoting the leveraging of INT to create or promote high value-added industries. All in all, the government has already launched a number of measures to promote reindustrialization. On the one hand, we would like to help existing industries transform and upgrade. At the same time, we will be supporting emerging high value-added sectors. The current time government will continue to play the role of a promoter and facilitator and provide comprehensive support in terms of land, technology, capital, and talent. Reindustrialization is a long-term policy. We are just at the starting point. And we need time and the support from across the society before we can see any results. As I said at the beginning, our aim is that in the next 2 to 3 years, we'll revert the trend of the declining ratio of the manufacturing industries in the GDP. I would like to take this opportunity to appeal to legislators and people from different sectors to have reasonable expectations of reindustrialization, support the government in investing into the future, and we should have our eyes on the long-term benefits to be brought to this society. In the course, we will conduct periodic reviews to make sure that we can take care of the needs of various sides. We will continue to listen to the views of the legislators and the sectors. We will join hands with you to promote reindustrialization so that Hong Kong's industries can shine again. So I speak.
I now call upon Mr. Jonathan Ho to move an amendment. Madam Deputy, I move that Mr. Jimmy Ng's motion be amended. I propose the question to you that the amendment moved by Mr. Jonathan Ho to Mr. Jimmy Ng's motion be passed. I now put the question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by majority, respectively, of each of the two groups of members, that is, those returned by FC and those returned by GC, who are present. I declare the amendment passed. Mr. Kenneth LEUNG, as Mr. Jonathan Ho's amendment has been passed, you may move your revised amendment. Madam Deputy, I move that Mr. Jimmy Ng's motion as amended by Mr. Jonathan Ho be further amended by my revised amendment. I've only crossed out one line in my amendment, that is in relation to offshore tax, that is the one related to offshore tax. Well, I do think that this is well in line of the issue. However, I don't understand why Ms. An Cheng said that she would not support my amendment. And I propose the question to you that Mr. Kenneth Leung's amendment to Mr. Jimmy Ng's motion as amended by Mr. Jonathan Ho be passed. I now put the question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Mr. Gary Chan claims a division. The bell will ring for 5 minutes.
開始表決。
Voting begins. Please check your votes. If there are no questions, voting closes. Result displayed. Members from FC 15 present, 3 for, 9 against, 2 abstain. Those from GC 23 present, 14 for, 6 against, 3 abstains. I declare I think the question is not agreed by a majority of 2 groups of members. I declare the amendment negatived. Ms. Starry Lee. President, I move that in the event of further divisions being claimed at this meeting, this Council shall proceed forthwith with the division bell being rung for 1 minute. I now propose the question to you, and that is that the motion moved by Ms. Sari Lee be passed. Those in favour, please raise their hands. Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of each of the 2 groups of members. That is those returned by FC and those by GC who are present. I declare the motion passed. In relation to the motion and amendment on establishing a comprehensive reindustrialization policy regime, voting will take place after the division bell has been rung for 1 minute. Ms. Ann Chang, as Mr. Jonathan Ho's amendment has been passed, please move your revised amendment. President, I move that Mr. Jimmy Ng's motion as amended by Mr. Jonathan Ho be further amended by my revised amendment. In relation to the original motion of Mr. Jimmy Ng, I only propose to amend 3 points. That is, I say that the government should be urged to conduct a review. I have deleted the word timely because when it comes to reindustrialization, the issue has been delayed for a very long time. If it doesn't start, it will only delay the start of reindustrialization. And I've added something to the original motion. That is, in the light of demand changes in the global market, competitiveness in technology and cost, quantity and quality of talent, and capitalizing on the development trend of One Belt, One Road and the resources advantage of the Bay Area, the government must also formulate strategies and major foci for promoting reindustrialization. I add this because I want to say that when it comes to the manufacturing industry, it reacts with changes in the market. So when it comes to competitiveness, talent and supporting measures, they have all to be taken into account before they know how to move forward so that they can focus all their resources to further develop the industry. My last point is to add and study the provision of tax support for local high-technology manufacturers to increase their investment incentive, thereby consolidating the economic foundation for the reindustrialization of Hong Kong and driving the diversification of industries. I add this because when it comes to high-technology manufacturers, well, it is technology-intensive. Resources has to be constantly devoted into it. I ask for you to support it. I would like to remind members when it comes to the amendments, this is just to ask you to move the amended motion, not to speak on it. And I propose a question to you that Mr. Jimmy Ng's motion as amended by Mr. Jonathan Ho be passed. And I put the question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Mr. Ray Chen claims the division bell will ring for 1 minute. Voting begins. Please check your votes. If there are no questions, voting closes. Result displayed. Members returned by FC 15 present, 13 for, 0 against, 1 abstains. F. Those from GC 24 present, 16 for, 8 against, and no abstention. I think the question is agreed by majority of each of the two groups of members. That is, those returned by FC and those by GC who are present. I declare the amendment passed. Members have already been informed that as Ms. N Chang's amendment has been passed, Mr. Jeremy TAM has withdrawn his amendment. Mr. WU Chi-wai, as the amendment of Mr. Jonathan Ho and Ms. Ann Chang have been passed, you may move your revised amendment. President, I move that Mr. Jimmy Ng's motion as amended by Mr. Jonathan Ho and Ms. Ann Chang be further amended by my revised amendment. In my amendment, I only want to point out two important points. That is, in re-industrialization, we need a clear focus and building of a pool of talent should be the focus. This is to ensure that reindustrialization will benefit Hong Kong instead of sending a pool of talent outwards, because that will affect our long-term development. I ask members to support my amendment. And I propose the question to you that Mr. WU Chi-wai's amendment to Mr. Jimmy Ng's motion as amended by Mr. Jonathan Ho and Ms. Ann Chang be passed. And I put the question to you as stated. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of each of the two groups of members, that is, those returned by FC and those by GC who are present. I declare the amendment passed. Mr. LO Wai-kwok, as the amendments of Mr. Jonathan Ho, Ms. Ann Chang, and Mr. WU Chi-wai have been passed, you may now move your revised amendment. President, I move that Mr. Jimmy Ng's motion as amended by Mr. Jonathan Ho, Ms. Ann Chang, and Mr. WU Chi-wai be further amended by my revised amendment. I have kept the core issues of my amendment. When I spoke, I have already explained my reasons, and I do believe that these suggestions will be conducive to further thinking of this issue. I ask members to support my amendment. And I propose the question to you that Mr. LO Wai-kwok's amendment to Mr. Jimmy Ng's motion as amended by Mr. Jonathan Ho, Ms. Ann Chang, and Mr. WU Chi-wai be passed. I now put the question to you as stated. With those in favor please raise their hands. Mr. LEG claims the division bell will ring for 1 minute.
Voting begins. Please check your votes. If there are no questions, voting is closed. Results displayed. Members from FC's 15 present, 13 for, 1 abstention. Members from GC's 24 present, 16 for, 8 against. The question is agreed on majority respective each of the two groups of members, that is, those returned by FCs and those returned by GCs through the elections were present. I declare the amendment passed. Mr. Charles Mok, as the amendments of Mr. HO Kai-ming, Mr. Dr. N Chang, and Mr. WU Chi-wai and Dr. LO Wai-kwok have been passed, you may move your revised amendment. President, I move that Mr. Jimmy Ng's motion as amended by Mr. Ho Kai-ming, Dr. Chiang Lai-wan, Mr. WU Chi-wai, Dr. LO Wai-kwok be further amended by my revised amendment. And I propose the question that Mr. Charles Mok's amendment to Mr. Jimmy's motion is amended by Mr. Ho Kai-ming, Dr. Chiang Lai-wan, Mr. WU Chi-wai, and Dr. LO Wai-kwok be passed. I'll put a question as stated. With those in favor, please raise their hands. Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by majority respective each of the two groups of members, that is those returned by FCs and those returned by GCs through the elections who are present. I declare the amendment passed. Mr. Jimmy Ng, you still have 27 seconds to reply. Thereafter, the debate will come to a close. Mr. Jimmy Ng. Thank you, President. Once again, I want to thank the 7 members who have moved amendments to my motion and a member who have spoken on them. I think the debate has brought about new perspectives and new ideas, and it will be positive to our re-industrialization in Hong Kong. I thank members for their support to the motion. I now put a question to you that the motion moved by Mr. Jimmy as amended by Mr. Ho Kai-ming, Dr. Chiang Lai-wan, Mr. WU Chi-wai, Dr. LO Wai-kwok, Mr. Charles Peter MOK, and be passed. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those. Mr. WU Chi-wai claims a division. The division bell will be rung for 1 minute. Voting begins. Please check your votes. If there are no questions, voting is closed. Results display. Members from FC 16 present, 13 for, 1 against, 1 abstention. Members from GCs 24 present, 16 for, 8 against. I think the question is agreed to a majority respecting each of the two groups of members, that is those returned by FCs and those returned by GCs through direct elections who are present. I declare the motion passed. Debate on motion with no legislative effect. The motion